live by faith in Jesus. In fact, those who do this, those who live by faith in Jesus, the just shall live by faith. Those who do this do the complete opposite of what the world does. And that's where we see the great contrast. The world does one thing, and those who are justified, those who are righteous, do the complete opposite. They live by faith in Jesus. And since living by faith means we consistently look away from ourselves to a saving God found in Jesus Christ, and what does not living by faith mean? Not living by faith means one cannot look away from themselves. That's what it means to not live by faith. What no faith does is very simple. It looks to self. It looks inward. You see, what God originally intended for man, even in creation, was that man would look to God, trust in God, depend upon God. But in the fall, what happened? In the fall, man begins to look inward instead of away to a saving God. In fact, that is all that the unregenerate heart can do. I'm here to tell you this is never done without terrible consequences. Never done without terrible consequences. And the reason why is very simple. What you focus on is what you will worship. And what you worship is what you will become like. What you focus on is what you will worship. What you worship is what you will become like. That's why I read Psalm 115 earlier. What you focus on is what you worship. What you worship is what you become like, for good or for evil. Worship God, and guess what? You become more like God. That's the crescendo of this book. Romans 12, 1 through 2. After he's done with all this glorious theology, the first thing he says to his readers when he wants them to make application to their lives is what? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Offer yourselves up to God as your living act of worship. Worship God, you become more like God, meaning more Christ-like, more holy. If you worship idols, guess what you're going to become more and more like? You're going to become more and more like a God to yourself. And there's no in between. You can read it in Psalm 115 that I read earlier. You see, my dear friends, what I'm talking about right now, looking inward, being stuck on yourself, engaging in self-worship, engaging in idolatry, this is the big problem that America has. All the stuff you hear about on the news are symptoms. This is the big problem that America has. Self-worship. Idolatry. Everybody's worried about the sin of racism. What causes racism? Idolatry. Self-worship. What causes grown men and women to parade themselves through the streets of America, acting like a bunch of spoiled brats, destroying other people's property, and demanding that the world pay attention to them? Self-worship. Idolatry. It's exactly what the underlying problem is. What causes people to embrace a perpetual victimhood status? Self-worship. Idolatry. It's exactly what causes it. Why do we have government officials who think they are above the law? This is the reason why. It's idolatry. Why is it that our government actually sponsors things that the Bible clearly delineates as sin and wicked, things that God hates, like abortion, like homosexuality, like gay marriage, like this whole transgender issue? Do you honestly think for a moment that this idea of a person rebelling against what God gave them and carving their body up to become something else is not rebellion against their Creator? That's exactly what it is. And the reason why it is that is because they are worshiping themselves. They're full of idolatry. That's the underlying reason. All of these things that I just mentioned boil down to one common denominator, and it is idolatry. Idolatry is rooted in the worship of self rather than the one true God. If you don't want to worship God, you will end up worshiping yourself.